increasing Jordans.
Honkai Star Rail is a turn-based gacha RPG developed by Chinese game company MiHoYo, with the sole focus of innovative team building, utilizing paths, and matching up units to elemental weaknesses, except recently none of that really matters. Each passing day, I see another angry Reddit post or YouTube video about issues such as HP inflation, the need for a shiny new 5-star team, or even the new global passive effect that's just been implemented. And I have to say, I kind of agree with all of them. While Powercreep is a problem found in the majority of gacha games, and is simply a result of releasing new mechanics or playstyles, or just selling the new characters, I feel like it's a much more glaring issue in Star Rail. It's even gotten to the point where we have animation creep. With characters, you can ignore weaknesses or straight up brute force the enemy regardless of their element. It kind of destroys the original appeal of the game's design and what they advertise themselves to be on release. Why worry about which enemy your Sealer can attack and hopefully one-shot when you can just play Casterus and annihilate 10 at once? This question got me thinking about the paths the devs are choosing to go down, and I grew interested in looking at how the recent character kits have evolved from the game's release. Now, this video is coming from someone who really loves Star Rail. I've been playing since day one, I log in daily, clear all endgame content, so basically I have no life, but that doesn't mean I don't see issues with the game. I'm curious as to what other people's opinions might be on this topic, so feel free to comment down below, as long as it's kept civil. Of course, you're allowed to disagree with points I make, as not everybody actually feels the pressure to follow meta. I just think it may still be a healthy outlook to understand why it may affect other players negatively. And with that being said, I'll jump straight into my first point, and that would be global passives. I know this has been a very hot topic recently, and I'm super late to the conversation as usual. However, I do agree with this being a really bad idea, and I'll explain why. With the release of Casterus in April 2025 came a very controversial kit mechanic, which, if you don't know of, is something called a global passive. This is essentially a type of ability that can trigger on any of the teams you play, regardless of whether or not the character with said passive is on that team. As long as you own them, that passive applies to all of your characters. In this case, Casterus' global passive allows the revival of each of your teammates once per battle. They'll temporarily delay becoming down, and as long as you can heal or shield that fallen character in time, you can continue using them as normal, otherwise they'll just die. While this technically isn't even that good of a passive, it can save you a retry in endgame mode. This also just feels like a huge bonus to Casterus' already great kit, with her being arguably one of the best damage dealers as of late. You would expect a passive like this to be given to a sustain character, as that's kind of their job. You know, keeping your team alive. This global passive is already quite similar to Fushuan's E2, which further demonstrates my point. Should a DPS be able to revive a whole team without even being part of that team? What is the point of Star Rail having interesting paths just for the characters in them to take the jobs of other paths? It's already difficult enough for the devs to release balanced sustains that don't do what older characters already do, and more. We can see this with characters such as Linksha, an abundance unit, or Tribi, a harmony unit. However, aside from the great healing or buffs they already offer, they can both deal very decent damage through their follow-up attacks. But returning back to Casterus, why exactly is her global passive actually a really bad idea for a gacha game? Because this incentivizes the idea that it's a completely acceptable kit idea that should be added to future characters. In turn, this sets a very toxic precedent, which one day could result in passives such as crit bonuses, resistance pen, or other important stats just from simply owning that character on your account. So what happens when you aren't a fan of Casterus, or you don't have the jades to pull for her? Most likely, you might feel the need to pull for her anyway, as her huge damage numbers and passive affecting any team you play will convince you that you need her. And this is what Hoyoverse wants from you. This feels like an extremely money-hungry tactic and pressures people who were never planning on pulling her to do it either way. And for those of you who think this type of passive is perfectly fine, I'd just like you to imagine every single future 5-star also having a global passive, all with various useful gimmicks. Do you like the idea of pulling for characters you dislike, just to claim endgame rewards to pull characters you do like? Yeah, I didn't think so. This problem mostly affects the free-to-play or low-spending players of the game, which kind of sucks considering only a very small percentage of the player base are whales, aka very high spenders. And yes, I know this is a gacha game. It's literally made to be the game version of a casino, but you need to keep player retention. This reminds me of the release of the Switch 2, which is around £400, with each of its games ranging from around £65 to £75. From the amount of outrage this has caused, I think Nintendo would make Switch fans happier and make more money having the games more accessible to a wider audience. I feel the same can be applied to Star Rail. Of course, there are players who won't feel affected by this at all, and will continue to enjoy the game without worrying about which character has what, and that's completely okay. I just ask you to consider the opinions of those who do find this to be an issue. Considering the nature of gacha games and how quickly they move on to the next new, better thing. Not to mention, we could get to a point where things like global passives or power creep begin to affect the story. If you can remember the pre-nerfed Aventurine boss back in 2.1.
Oh. Oh, okay. Okay. Alright. Okay. Alright, what the fuck is going on right now? What the fuck is happening?
Many players, including myself, were struggling with beating his second phase, as to not risk getting one shot by him, you would need to attack multiple dice at a time. This simply wasn't possible for characters following the hunt path, or simply single target attacks in general, heavily limiting the units you could use for this. It also just felt really bad for anyone who didn't pull Acker on that patch, including myself, hindering my progression of the main story quest. Luckily, this boss was nerfed, and hopefully we won't have to experience another problem like this in the future. And before you start saying skill issue or get good, this was a genuine mechanic that you couldn't bypass unless you had multiple well-built characters who could attack more than one dice, and there wasn't a Castorus back then to save you. I'd next like to talk about the rapid release of 5 stars. With the release of new 5 stars every patch, this pressures players into having to choose a select few characters. While yes, this is a normal habit for any gacha game, you often have more time to save between banners in other games. For example, Genshin Impact tends to feature one new 5-star character per patch, with some halves only rerunning older characters. As soon as they tried releasing 2 new 5 stars in the same half, this caused community uproar, as not only were they meta for each other, they were also very powerful in general, meaning many players wanted both of them. Players then needed to decide between one or the other, or spend money to guarantee both of them. This is exactly what's happening in Star Rail, except spread out across every single half. So you want the Herta, a very broken Emanator? Okay, nice, you can have her. Oh, you want a Glaya too? What about Tribby, an extremely good meta support used in various teams? Maybe Mighty, if you ignore his autoplay mechanic. How about Castorus, Anaxa, Hyacine, or Cypher? Phynon or the Limited Fate collab? Not convinced yet? What about the multiple 5-star reruns going on at the same time of these banners? What about all their light cones or eidolons? It's genuinely impossible to guarantee multiple of these characters unless you've been saving for a long time, skip the ones you like less, or spend huge amounts of money. And what makes this worse is how great many of these characters perform in endgame content, or more specifically, their synergy with each other. Many teams nowadays function much better consisting of only 5 stars. For example, you have Aglaya, Sunday, Woho, and Robin. Without these units, you'll be struggling to run your Aglaya at a baseline. You could use Tingyan to give her the much needed energy, although this is still pretty terrible. The other solution is to pull for Aglaya's E1, which can generate her more energy. Another example would be break teams, where if your Trailblazer is on the Remembrance path, would then require Ruan Mei and Fugue. While you can replace Linksha with Gallagher, she definitely offers a lot more. But as the break meta's ending and shifting into the Remembrance path, Hoyo are fine with giving out Ruan Mei for free, as most players probably own her already. Even character trials recently have been starting to use more 5-star units in their teams, as there just aren't any viable free-to-play teams. Again, looking at Aglaya's team, she just doesn't have any viable 4-star supports. This may also pressure players to pull for those other 5 stars, seeing as they perform so much higher than any other substitute would. Realistically, the only recent DPS who can run with low investment is the Herta, allowing Gallagher, Remembrance MC, and even Serval to run alongside her, although she still has much better substitutes, such as the newly released Anaxa. I really feel for the newer players and the number of 5-stars they'll feel the need to pull just to run the DPS they like. I've seen time and time again new players asking for team building advice just for people to say, pull Robin, pull Sunday, pull the new meta support. And whilst this isn't inherently wrong, in the long run, they'll just be waiting months for specific characters to rerun. Maybe they can't afford said character, or even dislike them. Now I know it's easy to say you don't need to pull for every single meta character, or even clear the endgame content. However, the free-to-play players are relying on these jades and rewards you get from endgame content, where you need these characters to actually receive the rewards. While this problem isn't exactly new, with Imbibitor Lunai wanting Sparkle for skill points, or Acheron wanting Jiaoqiu, it feels like almost every new DPS wants a full 5-star team, with barely any room for substitutes. So you want a HP-related support for Mighty? Pull Tribby or you're screwed, I guess. Of course you can just pull for who you like, but StarRel continually feels like it's one of the only gachas where this is unironically bad advice. Good luck clearing any endgame content unless you're min-maxing the 1.0 characters. Better get used to the meta moving too fast and leaving your account in the dust, as useful as a fully built blade. Funny how we're going from Genshin could never to StarRel could never. At least all Genshin units are still usable or even greatly relevant nowadays. Lastly, it doesn't help that many characters since around Acheron's release have core quality of life stats locked behind Eidolons or light cones. Yunli needs to get hit to deal more damage, so her light cone heavily increases her aggro. Rappa's light cone gives a ton of break effect, regenerates energy, and gives action advance after using her ultimate. Meanwhile, light cones and Eidolons for all the characters were simply a feel-good stat bonus to their already good kit. This is merely a classic case of Hoyoverse creating a problem and selling you the solution. But moving on from this topic, I'd like to talk about the current 4 to 5-star ratio. As of May 2025, StarRel currently has 23 4-star characters against a whopping 42 5-stars. And if you have yet to notice a pattern in Amphoreus, it's likely that every Chrysosaur will be a 5-star, and there are 12 of them. Our last limited 4-star was Moze, releasing in September of 2024, and we currently have no official information on any upcoming 4-stars, so why is this such a big problem? If some of the Amphoreus characters were converted to 4-stars, there would be much less strain on fear of missing out, but also on Hoyoverse having to pump out crazy designs and strong unique kits to fill in every half patch. It would also help newer players to have a wider variety of 4-star characters to build, as they won't be able to create the abundance of full 5-star teams that we often see today. 4-stars can also be easier to pull max Eidolons for, unless you're like me getting 0 Moses within 120 pulls. One use are characters such as Arlen, Hook, Dan Heng, or Yukong. Once newer players reach further into the game, they'll find out quickly that without perfectly optimized builds, 4-stars will fall off very heavily. On the flip side, we do have a few great 4-stars, both in design and meta usage. These include Hunt March 7th and Moze for follow-up teams, Herta and Serval to battery the Herta, Pila for defense shred, or Gallagher for break teams, and pretty much any healer slot, and they can comfortably substitute their 5-star counterparts. Is it really so hard for Hoyo to create new, well-performing 4-stars without feeling the need to heavily power creep them with a 5-star version? If players can't pull a full 5-star team required for their DPS to run well enough, they'll be relying on these 4-stars, and when many of these 4-stars are useless, this becomes a problem. Just take a look at the last 4-star selector we had. Who the f is choosing Hook, my guy? It's gotten to the point where 5-stars are power creeping 5-stars. Just look at Blade and Mighty, or Silverwolf and Anaxa, and when's the last time you've seen anyone use Sparkle or a DOT team? These are amazing characters, but they're outshined massively with better eidolons, light cones, and traces. Harmony units offer so much more in their kit, and DPS scaling is much higher with more useful mechanics packed into their kits, even outside of their niche. Meanwhile, the older characters are considered so bad that Hoyo would rather add them to the loss pool instead of fixing the game's power creep, because rerunning them won't make them money anymore. And while Blade, Silverwolf, and Kafka are receiving apparent buffs, we don't know how useful these will be at the moment, or if it will push these characters into relevancy. It's a genuine concern to wonder how long all of the newer units will last in the meta before also being rendered useless, only for that character to become part of the loss pool. We also have situations like Jingyuan's, where with the release of Sunday, this allowed him to work much better as it fixed a fundamental part of his kit. While I'm glad I get to use my Jingyuan and his light cone again, the problem with this is essentially needing one particular unit to make a character playable. Now my final point is all about the changes to endgame content over time and how the natural progression of Hoyo's decisions have resulted in the shilling of specific units or playstyles. For this, I'll mainly be referring to Memory of Chaos. Again, this may not apply to everyone, as Star Rail does have a huge number of casual players. However, I believe the experiences for players who do enjoy this type of content still matters. The most glaring issue as of now is the crazy HP inflation. I watched an interesting video by a creator named Kachulu 2, which dove into a graph showing the HP of bosses from 1.0 to 3.0. I'll link his video down in the description if you'd like to watch the whole thing. He states the HP of bosses tended to rise significantly higher around the release of very strong units. Between 2.1 and 2.5, we had the releases of DPS's Acheron, Firefly, and Fei Xiao, and in between them the supports Robin, Jiaoqiu, and a Ruan Mei rerun. These characters had amazing synergy and were the strongest teams in the game at the time. With these units being so strong, of course Hoyo would want to make their successors even stronger to sell better. And the same goes to new supports. Why do Linksha and Tribi need to do big damage over their already good kits? This simply feels overloaded and sets the bar way higher for any future supports, needing to offer more and more. People will still pull for characters if they like them. They don't always have to be game-breaking or more powerful. Forcing us to feel the strain of choosing the stronger character will only lead to burnout and further power creep down the line. How about making combat actually challenging and utilize more interesting mechanics instead of a consistently increasing DPS check or relic RNG? This now feels more like a gacha than an actual game. Now looking at the MOC buffs, they tend to cater to the latest released characters, making them appear much stronger and more useful than the characters who can't utilize that buff. For example, as much as I love Mighty, I laughed when I saw the MOC buff during his banner. Let's take a look. Increases all allies' max HP by 30%. Considering the only two DPS which scale off of HP are Blade and Mighty, and one of those are dead in a ditch, this isn't very useful outside of helping with Tribi's damage or HP scaling healers. While it can be nice for general survivability, with the amount of damage bosses do anyway, it's hard to notice much of a difference. The other important part of the buff states, every time an ally consumes HP, restores HP equal to 10% of their max HP. The only characters in the game right now that can consume their own HP include Mighty, Blade, Firefly, Jingliu, Jade, and Arlen. Realistically, nobody is using Blade or Jingliu, and definitely no Arlen. I kinda forgot Lil Bro existed. So only 3 out of 64 characters can utilize this buff. As long as the buffs cater towards the strongest units, even the enemy's elemental weaknesses don't matter. You'll be brute forcing through them anyway. And this completely disregards the main attraction of the game itself. A turn-based game initially focused on innovative team building and matching up elements to enemy weaknesses has now become an auto-battler with weakness ignores and implants. Now, I'm not saying the game shouldn't change. that would just get boring. But instead of this blatant power creep, where are the interesting enemy mechanics to play around? What if enemies could remove our buffs instead of just the other way round? Or perhaps the enemy could negate certain weaknesses for a certain number of turns, similar to Persona 5. The problem with this is again requiring a variety of different elements, which leads to even more pulling. Sadly, I think this is just a core problem within the way a gacha game is structured. I feel the repetitive team problems in MOC could easily be resolved through having the option to choose one of 3 buffs, similar to Pure Fiction. That way, you would have much more freedom to use different team synergies instead of being glued to the same 2 teams for the foreseeable future. This could even revitalize certain team comps, such as DOT. It's understandable that so many players dislike what Star Rail is turning into, because I and many others absolutely loved this game upon release, and still do. However, if you can't use your favorite characters and content, what's even keeping you playing? One of the worst arguments I see is, well, just stop playing, bro. That mentality won't change anything. It's okay to still like a game whilst understanding the negatives, and it's okay to want change, especially when the problems encountered make the game less enjoyable, more stressful, and more money hungry. We are the consumers after all, and it's only right to want to be treated fairly. I guess realistically, all we can do is wait and see if the community's loud enough to warrant change. As far as I know, even the CN community weren't too happy with the global passive either. But that's about it for this video. Thank you so much for watching this very long ramble, and feel free to give this video a like or even subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this. I'd love to see discussions about this topic, so the comments are open for you if you'd like to add anything I missed out on. I also have a growing Discord server with a kind, relaxed community, and we always welcome newcomers. So if you're interested in talking about other games, such as Twisted Wonderland, Infinity Nikki, or anything else, feel free to join. The link will be in the description. Lastly, I'd like to give a quick thank you to my server moderator Nut for making sure my script for this video was actually cohesive, and also to my friend Floppy73 for making my thumbnails. And again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.